Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AZ Snake Pit 2022. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hello there, and welcome everyone to the AZ Snake Pit 2022 MLB Draft preview. The draft itself will be hosted 2 weeks from Sunday, in which the Diamondbacks will be picking as early as second overall. So anyway, joining me in this preview special will be James Attwood and Wes Baier.
Howdy.
So we're gonna start with Drew Jones, who is considered the consensus top overall prospect in this draft. Outfielder, son of Andrew Jones, 10-time Gold Glove winner, 5-time All-Star for the Atlanta Braves. So anyway, gentlemen, do you think Jones goes first overall in this draft?
I think he probably does. There are plenty of arguments to be made that Elias will try to cut a deal, which would be great for Arizona. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to take the best player available in this one because he's a borderline talent going into that true top tier of talents, and he's the kind of guy that if he hits, he's going to be a franchise centerpiece for years to come. I wouldn't say he's a generational talent, but he is starting to push against that, and it's going to be rough to pass on him regardless of what their strategy is. He's not going to command the full 1-1 slot bonus, so they're still going to have some savings even if they take him.
Anything, Wes?
I mean, I agree. I agree with James here. It's very likely that they'll take Drew Jones. I mean, they've been drafting more on a need basis, but at this point, it would be really dumb for them to not draft Jones. And I don't think that they'll necessarily save that much. But on the other hand, it's the Orioles. Really, no one has an idea of who they're going to draft other than maybe 4 people. And I don't even know if they know who they're going to draft. So it would be great I'm happy either way if we get Jones or not.
From what I heard, the Baltimore decision making, it's come down to like a really small inner circle. I think the number of people that make that decision you can count on one hand, kind of thing. That's what I remember seeing.
I've heard it's literally 4 people.
I thought
that's what I've heard. Is it's like 3 or 4 people. Yeah,
basically the GM, the assistants, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if Jones doesn't go 1 to Baltimore, Arizona's swooping in.
Yeah, I have not seen anyone having the Diamondbacks take someone other than Jones if he's still on the board.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah, because
I think it's a pretty much unanimous consensus that if Baltimore passes on Jones, there's no way he gets past Arizona. Period.
Yeah, that's pretty much the consensus. If he's available, they'll take Jones.
So here's a hypothetical question. If the D-backs take Jones, which outfield spot do you think he ends up manning?
Center field.
I think he's going to end up in like right or left. I don't see him long term as a center fielder just because of who his dad is. I think it would be just a wiser decision to throw him in an easier position so he ages better.
I think he'll end up in right field because I think between him, Thomas, and Carroll, he is the best player for right field in terms of physical talent, in my opinion. Even though Carroll can
has the arm for it, by the time he arrives, I expect at least one of Thomas and Carroll will no longer be with the team. So, if not both, and we're talking 4 years removed from now.
Yeah, that's a good timeline.
Thomas is going to already be getting, assuming he sticks, he's going to be getting expensive, and we know how much, Arizona likes to spend. So unless they lock him up to one of those super friendly, team friendly contracts early in his career like within the next season or two, I fully expect that by the time Drew Jones is arriving, the Arizona outfield is going to look so different that it doesn't really matter. He's going to fit in the outfield. He can play any of the three positions. I think because of his superior fielding ability, he'll be stuck in center field. But if they still do happen to have Corbin Carroll and Alec Thomas both, then yeah, you put him in right field where he can show off that arm.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's in a pretty similar situation to what Atlanta has with Ronald Acuna Jr. Can play center field, but not necessarily the best option to play center field given the other players on the roster kind of situation. Assuming that the Diamondbacks are somehow able to compete in 2027. Which is,
I think the Diamondbacks are much more likely to be like an above 500 team sooner than you think.
Yeah, I can see it as soon as 24.
Yeah,
sure.
I could see them being certainly 2024, maybe even next year, depending on like how proactive Hazen is about roster construction. But that's very unlikely at this point, as anyone who's been paying attention can tell.
All right. So we'll move on from Jones to Tamar Johnson, another possible potential number one overall selection if Baltimore wants to go portfolio at 1-1. Johnson's more noted for his bat, probably likely to play a low defensive demanding position, either second base or left field, depending on the roster.
He'll be just fine at second base. His biggest detraction defensively is his arm. His footwork still needs help, but that's something that's going to be developed as he gets to more advanced coaching anyway. Right now he's kind of playing all over he's playing short and second and a little bit of left as it is right now, but his long-term home is going to be second base. He has enough defensive chops. He can stick there without being any kind of liability, and he actually kind of has enough range and does very well on getting low on the ball that he could actually probably even be an above average defender at second. He just is not going to stick at short, and he doesn't have the arm for third.
Fortunately,
I think his hit tool is good enough that it does not matter where he plays, honestly. Like, the guy can absolutely rake. He's one of the best hitters I've ever seen. Like, just watching him and like taking a batting practice for his age, he is very impressive.
It's not even just for his age. He's just an impressive hitter.
Yeah, especially so. But that's like you add in his age, it makes it like even more astounding, like how developed his hit tool is.
Yep. We're not talking Spencer Torkelson developed, but he might be one of the best. He might be one of the most developed hitters outside of Torkelson in at least the last 5 years, if not more.
I mean, in terms of like just raw ability, I'm talking about as a hitter. He's very, very, very gifted.
I was like, there's nobody else in the draft that has arguably a 70 hit, 60 power tool. There are some 60-60 guys like Young and Barry, but those are DH types as well. Going to be weaker defenders than even Johnson. Which I think you'll be fine at second base because he'll be learning from one of the best to play it defensively, Orlando Hudson. I believe probably coaches up a lot of the infield defense for the minor league guys. Saw him coaching up some of their top prospects this spring. Actually, I think Lawler was there. De Los Santos was another guy that he was doing drills with, and it's just like with Johnson, I feel like he'll have plenty of chances to earn that second base job, and he'll have a very good instructor to teach him how to play the position.
I think Orlando Hudson would be a fantastic influence on him as a player. One of the things why besides the hit tool, I'm attracted to Johnson because he's got a fantastic personality. He takes an active role in other his teammates as an extra coach, and he's very interested in the game. He's very much just focus on baseball, which I think is, if you're going to have like one interest and that's like your career you're going for, that's great.
All right. So for Tamar Johnson, what do you have for an ETA? I have 2025, second half of that season, is when he's getting called up.
Yeah, probably, assuming that things play out the way that his scouting scores say, he should be a somewhat rapid riser for a high school bat. Kind of thinking the 3 years is going to be the outside. There's a really, really good chance that after 2 to 2.5 years, he's in that kind of bubble where you got a whole lot of people banging the drum, bring them up, bring them up, bring them up, even though, you know, he maybe only has 50 at bats in AA, but he's still raking kind of thing. So
kind of like Goldschmidt in 2011.
Very much. I think he'll be a fast riser, but like to just rush him through the minors is not necessarily the best idea. In 2025, it seems like a very reasonable timeline. Maybe the end of 24, best case scenario.
Oh, that would be really pushing. He would have
to be really raking.
You'd have to put up Paul Goldschmidt numbers in AA.
Yeah, it's possible.
Like even out hitting what Corbin Carroll's doing right now.
Right. And he would have to do it quickly. I don't see that necessarily happen. And even if it did happen, I don't know that he'd get up any faster. At least not with the Diamondbacks, just because of the contention window. If he goes to Baltimore, I could see them moving him very quickly. I just don't see the Diamondbacks taking Tamar Johnson pretty much, despite what some outlets have. I just don't see Johnson going to the Diamondbacks if Baltimore takes Jones.
All right, so another name.
Hazen front office likes toolsy players. He's got a huge hit tool, but everything else is going to be very average. There are other prospects at the top of the board that have more tools. So I think that Johnson just doesn't necessarily fit.
Yeah, I don't think he fits well with Hazen's mold. I think I don't think he'll be drafted because he doesn't fit the type that the Diamondbacks front office drafts. But personally, that's the player I'd go with.
So Tamar Johnson didn't have average tools on the rest across the board. I think he would be actually considered a slam dunk one pick. Otherwise, anyway, move on to another high hit tool infielder, Brooks Lee.
Brooks Lee might be the safest pick in the draft. I would have if the Diamondbacks are taking Brooks Lee at number 2, they better be cashing in huge elsewhere in the draft because he's not going for $8 million. He might get 6.5, but my guess is he goes in the 5.5 to 6 range. So the kind of savings they're going to be looking at is going to be huge, and they need to spend every last penny on picking up a first-round high school talent that fell and paying that guy almost as much as they paid Brooks Lee with the second pick.
Or the third. Well, it doesn't matter what the order is if you're paying that much money.
Right. But yeah, he's a guy that I would actually expect Baltimore to focus on more than Tamar Johnson, because his overall tool set is much more rounded. He plays a variety of positions and he plays them well. And he is going to be a Tamar Johnson might be a rapid riser, depending on his bat. There's almost no reason to believe that Brooks Lee is going to take more than 2 years to reach the majors.
I agree he's the safest pick. He'll probably be the fastest riser. And I think if they're going to draft someone besides Drew Jones with the number 1, Brooks Lee seems like a very likely pick to me.
Yeah, I've been surprised. There hasn't been a lot of Brooks Lee number 1 overall pick mocks that I've seen throughout the cycle. That could change as we get closer.
I saw some of that early on. Some of that has gone away as Tamar Johnson has gone up and down, and Holiday has moved up. But I still think that Brooks Lee is going to be making somebody very, very happy, and it could easily be Baltimore. If the Diamondbacks, like I said, if the Diamondbacks took him, I'm hoping it's because they've already talked to somebody like Schultz and found out that the number is $4 million and that they're going to use the savings from Lee to get themselves Schultz as well or something like that.
Oh, you need to get savings out of multiple picks if you're looking to hit that kind of signing bonus, I think.
But that's the only reason the Diamondbacks should be looking at Lee. Otherwise, there are other picks.
Doesn't make sense, really. Yeah, there's better talent available. I mean, unless they have like something worked out already with both players, it doesn't seem like the wisest choice.
All right, so we'll do our third and final infielder in the top 5, Jackson Holiday, son of former Rockies All-Star Matt Holiday. We're all well acquainted with what that guy can do with a bat. But his son Jackson is a shortstop, committed to play for his uncle's program at Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been out of the top 5, probably the big riser of the group. The other 4 that we're going to talk about have been there pretty much since this draft cycle started. I would say November.
He's going to be the best defender out of the bunch, especially for the position that Drew Jones is going to be a great defender wherever he plays, but he's going to be playing in the grass. Jackson Holiday, if there's no reason to expect that he's going to move off of short unless he goes to
Arizona.
Well, no, I would expect Jackson Holiday to push Jordan Lawler off of short in terms of defensive ability and the ability to keep up with the bat just the same. Holiday has a better arm. Holiday has better range. He's got, for an infield arm, he's got a truly significant arm, and he has great instincts. Maybe has something to do with growing up around baseball his whole life.
Yeah, his dad is uncle.
He grew up
with his makeup is great as far as being around baseball. That and I agree with your assessment with him as a player. His makeup is good, and he has really great baseball instincts naturally too, just from being around it literally his whole life.
Yeah, I was going to say 4 of the top 5 prospects we're talking about have grown up around the game. Tamar Johnson being the exception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen some people have Jackson Holiday going Baltimore, and I could see them doing that depending on what kind of haircut he's offering them. If he's not offering them a big enough one, though, then I think they default back to Drew Jones, just because the timeline for arrival is going to be the same for both of them, except that Drew Jones has the higher upside.
All right. If you were, we'll actually ask that question later, but now the 5th and final player, everyone's pretty well acquainted with him, Elijah Green, outfielder from IMG Academy. A guy that I consider probably the biggest boom bust prospect in the draft due to the heavy, the loud tools as well as the questionable hit tool somewhere between, depending on the evaluator, probably either 45 or 50, which one is a fringe average, the other one is straight average. For those,
I put him on the lower end in terms of variance. His hit tool is probably the worst out of these 5 players.
His pure hit tool is he's definitely has the most to work on with his hit tool out of these 5. The big thing is if he can cut down on that swing and miss and work on lining the ball more than trying to sell out for power all the time. With his power, he doesn't need to be selling out. Then he, has an incredible ceiling because he's got light tower power and Corbin Carroll type speed.
Yeah.
Got the arm to play anywhere on the field. But
Yeah, I agree with your assessment, James.
The whole idea of if he can fix the hit tool, well, you can say that about, 85% of draftees. Elijah Green, I still cannot shake the comping him to early years Justin Upton.
That's a very good I was putting with like Elijah Dukes, but not crazy. That was the one we said earlier. If you want a full bust,
he's got a better run tool than Upton ever had, but the rest of it lines up very well. The big question about Upton was always whether or not he was going to get rid of the swing and miss in his game, and he sort of did. He found success. He found ways to succeed with swing and miss in his game. For all the hate that Justin Upton sometimes gets around the pit, he was an exceptionally good pick.
I was gonna say Upton ended up being what? Obviously, the consistency wasn't there because you're talking about a hit, the swing and miss. But in the 2 years that he flashed, we're talking about an MVP candidate,
right?
In 11, even though you can argue that he wasn't.
Yeah,
on that team.
When he was best hitter's game. I'm looking at his total WAR that he's produced. I'm looking up.
Upton was.
I would basically. Upton pick wasn't.
I think what hurts the Upton selection is
he wasn't a controversial player at all. For that pick.
Oh no, he was considered by many to be one of the safest 1-1 possibilities at the time.
Let's say what hurts Upton's reputation is there were a lot of players in that draft that went on to have better careers. He was the consensus.
Yeah, that's true. But at the time, I remember him pretty much every single draft, mock draft I saw had Upton at number 1.
Oh, because
he was on a number 1 on everyone's board.
Well, when we're looking at what Upton did during the course of his career, we're looking at a guy who never reached his ceiling and was a multi-time all-star without ever reaching his ceiling.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Green falls too. Green's the kind of guy that even without reaching his ceiling, he might be an all-star player. But that still boils down to finding enough hit tool. That's
Upton produced 32 WAR, which is he's had a couple of negatives in the last few years, but that's a pretty successful pick for he, like James said, he didn't produce to his ceiling and didn't reach his full potential, but it's still a pretty I would take that almost every time.
I was gonna say Upton doesn't skew the number 1 overall pick better or worse is pretty much what we can say. I think maybe slightly above average.
He was a very average result.
Same would have been true if Drew went first overall the year before.
Brett.
Troy Tulowitzki second overall. He was on a Hall of Fame pace at 32, and then he literally broke down. No, wait, no. Troy Tulowitzki went later. Never mind.
Yeah, Tulo went late.
Look it up. I can look it up. Baseball Reference is a great search.
Yes, it is.
All right, so some names. Alex Gordon went second overall. About equally as good a career, but obviously his
Alex Gordon, Jeff Clement.
Well, let's just talk about successful hits. So Zimmerman, I'm pretty sure they're going to build a statue of him in Washington.
Yeah, but there's no way you take Zimmerman 1-1 in that draft.
Then
you don't.
The Juicer went 5th overall.
Tulowitzki
went
Maven,
7th.
McCutcheon, Bruce.
But a lot of these guys
if you want to
that wound up having massive careers were not guys that were ever in the 1-1 conversation, though. And that's where a lot of it breaks. It's like you weren't taking the guys that wound up having great careers that were selected at 12 and 14.
Really true.
It's a really good draft if you look at it.
Oh, it was an amazing draft. As opposed to some of the
Yeah, there actually were a lot of players. Yeah, it was a draft. I don't see who you would take over like up in that draft anyway. Like look at
without hindsight.
Max could have taken like certainly we could have taken someone better than one. Lots of options to be taken better than him. I mean, you have.
You can argue Gordon or Zimmerman maybe that 05 draft. Because obviously Gordon would have been a good fit for left field.
Yeah, with hindsight, but like was no one else in the conversation for number one that year. It was a consensus. Like there was it was like Bryce Harper level hype over a high schooler, which, they're really. He was like heads and shoulders above in terms of talent, like his talent evaluation at the time. Like there were certainly questions about whether he'd stick at shortstop, which he obviously didn't. But
a big part of him moving off a shortstop was that his bat was further along, and they wanted to hurry up and get him.
And he wasn't going to play shortstop.
Moving a guy to the outfield is a great way to shorten his time to the majors.
I would say shortstop wasn't happening because Drew's there. Second base wasn't happening because Orlando Hudson still had still had a year and a half of control left. And Carlos Quinn had pretty much disappointed in right field at that point. I think they actually developed him in center, but obviously Chris Young was there. I think Chris Young sometimes, people forget how good he really was.
Quentin was in center. He was great. Quentin was in center, if I remember correctly, until the Young trade. And then they moved him over they moved Quentin to right.
I think they had someone else in center. I think it was Eric Burns that was the everyday center fielder before they called up Young. If I remember correctly. And then Burns moved to left field. Young took over in center. And they got a revolving door production right field before Upton came up. I think is what happened in 07. So anyway, let's move on. Let's get to the topic. So we'll expand once again on the Baltimore first overall. Obviously, we all agreed that Drew Jones is probably most likely the guy that goes first overall in Baltimore, gets some form of savings. So if we look up past history on Mike Elias, and there's, I believe, 9 drafts you can look at. I think there were 10 first-round picks that I looked at earlier. There's an article out on the Snake Pit if you want to check it out. But obviously the big 2 savings were Carlos Correa in 2012 and Heston Kjerstad, second overall in 2020.
Location.
But for the most part, I think outside of those years, they've gone with whoever the consensus best player was on the board. In that case, if you consider, I think the only other exception might be Colton Cowser last year, but
Cowser was definitely a haircut sign.
Yeah, I was going to say, but I would have expected Cowser to go maybe with the next 2 or 3 picks had Baltimore taken someone else kind of situation. So you can argue a BPA without selection, even though Jordan Lawler was on the board at the time.
Yeah, I still think they're taking Jones unless they're getting a really steep cut for either Lee or Johnson. The signing demands by those 2 players could drastically change the landscape. There's honestly not a whole lot of reason for Johnson to give a huge discount. He could get the 6 to 6.5 now, probably.
Yeah, there's 4 teams that can offer that without going over slot.
And with that being the case, there's not a whole lot of reason for him to go below that, especially because he's going to if he doesn't sign, he's going to one of the nation's best baseball factories and going to be playing here in Tempe. So,
and then he'll be probably in the conversation for first overall in 3 years.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If he does not get his 6 to 6.5, then assuming that's what his range, then he's easily in the conversation all over again in 3 years.
Yeah, I was looking it up. Obviously, there are 6 teams that can go over $6 million without going over slot. As far down as Miami at 6.
And because of that, I think Johnson winds up not going to school because somebody's going to.
There are too many teams that can
that.
offer it.
Yeah, there's too many teams that can offer the 6.5. Now, if his number is 7.5, that changes things again. And at that point, the savings aren't big enough to pass on Jones or, because Jones has a much higher ceiling.
Yeah, I agree with that. Not much I can add to it. I mean, there's really, I don't see Baltimore like really going with anyone else unless they really have like a deal lined up that's like going to bowl them over with savings so they can really go over slot with their next pick.
Yeah,
Drew Jones is the most likely.
Brooks Lee may be that guy. I mean, there's reasons to believe
That's the one exception.
That Brooks might be had for even less than 6, like not a lot less than 6, but he's still going to be in an asking tier below Johnson most likely. And if that's the case, then wow, yeah, they can save themselves
almost $3 million.
They can save themselves almost mid-range money.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are drafting 10th. Well, we saved more than you're going to be able to spend.
Yeah.
So that there is that possibility, but I just can't shake the feeling that they'll wind up taking Jones and leaving us with everybody else.
Yeah. I think it could go either way, 50-50. They go with, like I said, if they have a deal lined up, certainly I think that's more likely than drafting Jones. But like that he's the hype around Drew Jones as a player is pretty high. And if he's not like going for the max, then he certainly will I see them going with Drew Jones.
Well, no player in this draft is getting the max 1-1. Not even Drew Jones.
It's very unlikely.
So if you're wondering, the highest ever high school bonus, is $7.5 million, but that was not in the slotting system era.
Right.
So then we go $6.5 million with Jamison Tyone. Oh wait, no, that's not slot era either. Darn, how far down do I have to go? I was hoping to see what it is, and I can't find it. Oh, because this article was written in 2014. That's why.
Oh, well, yeah. Things have changed a bit.
Yeah. I'm like, why is it only 6.25? All right, I'll get to the answer to that, but I think Balt's trying to look up the highest signing bonus. We know Lawler got 6.7 last year, which was the highest signing bonus, I think, in the entire high school crop. I know we can figure out which one's the highest. I think that might be Drew Jones's ask first overall.
Well, Jackson Jobe last year went for almost $7 million. And he was out of high school, obviously. He got more than Lawler did. I remember that much.
I was going to say Lawler, Mayer, and Jobe all got in that 6.5 to 7 million range.
Million.
Nobody spent $17 million for a single player in the draft since 2011.
No, that's saying like the first round. It's not. I take that back. I can find that.
But yeah, Lawler went for 6.7, and I could easily see Jones demanding at least 7. Especially with Jackson Jobe having gotten 6.9 last year.
Okay, so Bobby Wood at 7.7 million, just under 7.8. That would be the. Let's see if Jones' ask is that would that change would Baltimore take him first overall? Basically,
It
just beat
depends.
that.
I think that really then depends on how much the Johnson and Lee asks are, because if his ask is coming close to 8, then they, if they get a guy for 6,
I think they'll
they're
pass.
saving over $2 million. But if his ask is closer to 7 than it is to 8, now we're talking about a much, much smaller difference. And so I still think it's less about how much Jones is asking for it at 1-1 and more about how much Lee or Johnson is asking for at 1-1.
Yeah.
Or
It's like, what's the
potentially even
savings on the other guys versus Jones?
I mean, even Holiday isn't going to take as much, but I don't see them. I don't see them taking Holiday unless his savings are so massive that it gets stupid.
Under $6 million, I would say anyone under $6 million, certainly a threat to sign. If Baltimore wanted to basically run away with 2 first-round top 20 guys, basically.
Right.
All right, so let's assume here that Baltimore does take Jones first overall. Who's your guy second overall to the Diamondbacks?
I personally think if Jones is gone, they're going to take Green. I've seen every player we've discussed mocked to them so far on, drafts that didn't have, that had Jones going 1-1. Like I said, I have yet to see a mock where Jones was available that they didn't take him. I think they'll take Green. I'm not sure that he would be my pick. My own personal pick would probably be Brooks Lee. I would not be sad to get Tamar Johnson instead. I think that both Tamar Johnson and Elijah Green have very high bust potential, but the bust potential on Tamar Johnson seems to be more about whether or not he will stick on the diamond or need to move to DH, in which case he will need to live up to every bit of the scouting hype around his bat.
Yeah.
Whereas with Elijah Green, he has a much higher upside, but the big question is whether or not he'll ever hit enough to get to the show. And so if I'm picking one or the other out of those two, I probably take Johnson. But Brooks Lee is a safer pick. So
That's who I go with if Jones isn't available. I'd go with Lee because he's a little closer to the Diamondbacks' window of contention that they're aiming for. I don't necessarily think the high school players will make it that quickly through the majors. Like Brooks Lee will probably arrive at the same time as Lawler, most likely. I think that I would be happy. Like James said, Elijah Green. I think he's most likely to be a bust. And like I would be happy with them taking. I don't know if they necessarily would take Elijah Green. I could see them taking Holiday or Lee over Green.
Yeah, I could definitely
or even Tamar Johnson.
There's an argument to be made for any of the 4 of them. Honestly, I am a guy who, the closer you are to the top, the more I want best player available. The problem is all 4 of these guys are really close. Highest upside absolutely belongs to Elijah Green. And so that's kind of where I think they default, because if you're going to swing and miss, at least swing big.
Yeah. Elijah Green's hitting approach explained in one sentence.
I mean, I like a reason why I like Tamar Johnson is like he's not necessarily like the most toolsy out of the players. He's probably the least toolsy. It's just that one tool along with his makeup is like, just for me, it's like head and shoulders above the other guys. I see Drew Jones and Jackson Holiday as guys who were absolutely probably spoiled their whole lives having dads who were in the major leagues. And
Rich
Brooks
dads.
Lee has that he has a baseball background, having a father who's a coach, which is like much better. I like that makeup, but I'd go with Tamar Johnson over like his personality and that hit tool. I mean, if his power develops, he that's a really that's a big swing to me. I don't know, like Elijah Green, I just have a feeling like he'll be a bust.
It depends on the team, I think.
It does depend. It depends on the player development. I mean, some teams he'll absolutely will be a bust. Other teams he'll make it. It really depends on who he goes with.
You trust him in the Diamondbacks player development system?
I don't know. I don't think I do. I don't think I do.
You can think
the thing that scares me about putting Elijah Green into the Diamondbacks farm system is where the farm system is located. He doesn't have to have he does not have to have any kind of real true hit tool to put up video game numbers.
I was going to say Hillsborough is probably the only one that plays close to neutral.
Hillsborough plays slightly pitcher friendly, but it's close to neutral. But Visalia is a good hitter's park. Amarillo is ridiculously hitter friendly and homer friendly.
Yeah, ask Corbin Carroll.
I'd actually say that Hillsborough is not necessarily. I mean, yeah, it leans slightly to the pitcher side, but this with the heat the heat waves we've been seeing in the Pacific Northwest, those parks become hitter friendly. That time of the year, because they were flying out of the ballpark last season towards the end of the year.
I was going to say, with a guy like Green, you might have to look past the surface numbers. You have to look at, okay, what's strike, and this is the case with some of the prospects already in the system, high power prospects already in the system. They swing at strikes, taking balls, they working counts and whatnot. Kind of just looking beyond just the box score things.
Right, and so I'm fine with any of the other four, but then my decision with those four comes down to what's the plan for the other picks. Obviously, Elijah Green is going to take pretty much. I don't
almost
think
all of it.
Yeah, he's going to come close enough that you might as well call it all of. I mean, there will be some savings. He's not going for 8.1, but he's going to come damn close. Whereas Holiday, Johnson, and Lee are, at various levels not going to command that much. So if you take one of those three instead of Green, what's your plan for that other money? Because you're passing on a guy that's probably going to be a multi-time All-Star, even if he makes the show, he's probably a multi-time All-Star, again, like Upton, even if he doesn't reach his ceiling.
So my choice for this one will be, I try and figure out who gives me the best deal between Johnson, Lee, and Holiday. So like I said, if it's like a situation where it's like Holiday, Lee, and Johnson are all in that $6.5 million range, I might offer. Then it becomes a choice of Lee versus Holiday. Which infielder do I want? And obviously, Lee's a guy that is probably, and Lee's probably got the best chance of making the majors out of any player in this draft, since he probably only needs about one full season in the minors to get seasoned up, whereas Holiday's probably going to need 2 or 3 more. Since he's still kind of since Holiday still got a lot of projection left, it's still got quite a bit of projection left. Although, it is possible they have him and Lawler coexist on the same side of the infield, so I don't think it's necessarily a bad. I don't necessarily think it's a waste of a pick, even though you're taking a shortstop. Like I said, best deal between the three. I think Johnson would have to be under $6 million to be worth the drop off in defense and speed compared to the other two guys. Yeah, this is obviously something I mentioned earlier. I think worst case scenario for Green is he turns into another Jordan Adele. I think
that's
be
very, very fair fear, and that's like I said, that's kind of the reservation I have with Green is that the most difficult tool to develop is the one that he is currently needing the most help with. And
yeah, I remember making that same argument against Adele 5 years ago, too. I just felt like there was too much swing and miss.
So that's why I said at the beginning, Green probably wouldn't be my pick, even though I still do think that that's where the Diamondbacks go.
Although I was going to say Green's kind of atypical compared to who they've taken in the past. Smith was considered a high hit tool. Obviously, that ended up being a missed evaluation. I think everyone missed.
I'm not sure how much that's missed or not. I mean, he was considered the most polished college bat at the time, and looking at the current production out of that draft, Varsho has been the best bat, but that was kind of the dark horse. There's a good chance he might be, but because he didn't come from as big a program, he didn't get as good a look. But I mean, Peyton Smith has been so far the most polished bat, especially out of the first round. It's just been a matter of that was a crap draft. That draft and the one where they picked
it really was.
Taking Dansby Swanson at 1-1 wasn't because he was such a magnificent player, is because that draft kind of sucked too.
Well, Alex Bregman disagrees. But yeah,
Alex Bregman is
the talent.
By the way, Charlie,
the talent available in that draft was not very impressive. So Tamar Johnson, I think, has a better, definitely has a better hit tool than Peyton Smith. I think he has a better hit tool than Peyton Smith right now.
Yeah, all these guys except for Green do.
Tamar Johnson, the comment that you take Tamar Johnson because he's the best prospect. I have no issues against taking Tamar Johnson at number 2 instead of Green, as long as they are.
You don't think that either.
As long as they are committed to moving into second base right away, and they.
Yeah,
and he basically bugs Orlando Hudson for the next 2 years.
Right, and then
I could. The thing is his other tools may not be that great. His arm's not that great. That's something that you can't really teach. But you can adjust his swing so he produces some power. You can work with the tools that he has and improve upon him. You cannot. I don't think you can teach a hit tool.
Well, you can't. I don't know if you can necessarily teach bat speed either.
Yeah, his bat speed is very impressive. I think it might be the best out of the 6.
We have a primer coming up on Tamar Johnson here in a couple days.
July 2nd. If anyone wants the skinny on that one.
I was saying, looking at Jackson Holiday, he is a lot of growing left to do because his dad is a much bigger guy. I don't think Holiday he's gonna end up on a corner position or in the outfield. I don't think he'll stick in the middle.
Well, if his arm sees any improvements, third base is an option
for Holiday. Oh, Holiday's arm is already good enough for third base.
So, like I said, it doesn't matter. I feel like it's a situation where
if
you draft Holiday, there's somewhere to play him.
Holiday's arm plays anywhere on the diamond. His arm is only going to get better, and it's already a 60 grade arm.
Well, MLB Pipeline has a 55, but a 55 arm can play at third base as well.
Especially if you have a good footwork.
Yeah. Although I don't know what these tools assume where he's going to be. I think Holiday's obviously going to be about 195, 200 when he's when he's hitting the major leagues. Maybe a little bit lighter, but it'll be in his prime about just short of 200, most likely.
Actually, comparing both Drew Jones and comparing both of the major league player kids to their fathers, you kind of gotta like Drew Jones. You worry with because Andrew Jones is like he fell off a cliff at the age of 30. I mean, that shouldn't be a team's concern drafting him because he'll be long gone by then. But I don't know how he'll age because of the way his father aged, because he's really skinny right now, which reminds me of a young Andrew Jones. So
I was going to say,
if he's playing in today's league, though, he's not going to be playing with near the
depends on the position.
Performance degrading supplements that Andrew Jones had in his career.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Jones looked really porky when Andrew Jones looked really porky when he was in a Dodgers uniform.
Yeah.
Whereas he looked a lot more leaner in a Braves uniform. Kind of thing. So anyway, we'll move on to more of a philosophical question. When would you consider portfolio to be a better option than just taking the best player on the board? A certain spot in the draft, or if it's just a situation where you have a lot of talent at the same level and you're just looking?
I think it depends entirely on the draft you're in. The one where the Diamondbacks took Dansby Swanson would have been a great draft for portfolio over BPA.
That was the case where the top two teams both did it.
You know, if you have an Adley Rushman, you have a Spencer Torkelson, sure, you take them, you pay them, and you figure out the rest later.
Or Jordan Lawler.
Well, Jordan Lawler was all about the fact that he fell so far. Last year I had been preaching take Henry Davis number one, and that's actually what Pittsburgh did. I liked Henry Davis better than Jordan Lawler, not because of the signing cost. I actually liked him better. He plays catcher. He's going to stick there, and he's not Adley Rushman, but he's still expected to be a plus on both sides, both behind the plate and at the plate. Most catchers are one or the other.
Yeah. Some of the catchers in this draft are more bat first guys with Susak and Parada.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, like, as far as like using the portfolio approach over like best player available, like James says, it's one thing is how the draft actually breaks down in terms of talent. If it's a really top heavy draft with like a couple guys who are really good and a bunch of guys who are mediocre in terms of talent, you're going to go best player available, especially if you're near the top. As far like if it's a really talent heavy draft, then like do the portfolio method, because then you can save money and get a couple better guys. So it depends on the draft, honestly.
Like when Houston,
if you're going to go portfolio, you need to be probably a top 5 picking team in order to be able to really kind of beef up and use that extra money. Get yourself some savings on top of a pick that was probably never going to get slot to begin with. So you have extra savings to be on top of savings. You really need to be able to turn when you're doing the portfolio, you need to be able to turn that first and second pick savings into enough that you're paying top 10 pick again for somebody else. Otherwise, you're just kind of spinning your wheels.
I was going to say, D-backs could find themselves in that situation, as we mentioned in the case where Drew Jones goes first overall. I mentioned take the best deal between 3. It just depends on what talent's on the board. If it's a situation that usually happens isn't a strong draft, or you just drop the tier of talent, is where the approach would make more sense.
And I put Green, Holiday, Johnson, Lee, and honestly even Jones in the same tier of talent. It's just that they each bring something slightly different. Tamar Johnson's bringing the best hit tool. Jones is probably bringing the best defense. Green's bringing the best upside. Holiday plays everywhere. Lee is going to be the fastest and safest.
All right. So let's go through a bunch of players that could be on the radar with the Diamondbacks' second and third picks of the night, which first one being 34th overall, their competitive balance A lottery pick, and 43 being their second round pick. So we'll start with a few college guys to start out with. Landon Sims, a right-handed reliever out of Mississippi State, although the stuff and ability to pitch extended outings out of the bullpen is a starter candidate. Definitely a guy that has 2+ pitches. The question is whether or not he can make the full transition or not.
I have my doubts, given that his third pitch is because he's your traditional fastball slider guy and both those pitches are probably 70 grade, close enough to it that we can call it that, and they have great spin rates. But his changeup is his third pitch, and it's just not convincing. It probably has a future value grade of 45 with a present value grade of 35. And with that being the case, sure, you draft him, you make him a starter and see how long he sticks. But realistically, I think he's absolutely a reliever. And I don't know. He's just. There are other candidates for the same kind of profile that I like better. I just don't see how Sims brings enough to be the Diamondbacks' 34th pick. His upside is, to me, back end closer, and more realistically, probably a fireman or middle reliever.
Yeah, I was going to mention there is a tidbit. Last year, they did try to move him in the rotation. They ended up needing Tommy John surgery.
So
I wouldn't draft it. I wouldn't. He's not. I don't think he's in the mix. I don't believe there's anything like there's no such thing as a pitching prospect. It's always a crapshoot. With a guy like that who's already had Tommy John, that always scares me away from drafting a player. But I don't know anything about him, honestly. He's new to me, so I can't add anything other than that.
I think with the probably I would say give him a 90% chance he ends up in the bullpen kind of situation. You're picking 30, especially at 34. You're probably not looking for that kind of thing. 43 might be a little bit more lenient on as a potential underslot guy if you secured your high school prospect at 34 kind of situation. That's the only way I can see it happening. Anyway, next arm, Peyton Pallett, right-hander from the University of Arkansas.
I don't have a whole lot on Pallett. He wasn't on my radar as somebody that they would be taking. So, coming out of Arkansas, we already know it's a good program. The thing I do have that I liked about him is that he's got 3 present value pitches that are at least average, with his curveball being an actual plus pitch. His fastball, when he's going right, is also a plus pitch, but it's inconsistent. He's got great control. He's a middle of the rotation kind of arm. I think it's really, really easy to see him falling to 43 or maybe even lower. The one thing that's going to help him is that this entire draft is kind of weak on college pitching.
There's no top. In fact, I don't even think there's a top of rotation arm in this entire draft class. There's a lot of, and there's quite a few middle of the rotation guys around there.
Some of that is due to the circumstances of the last 2 years where development has been stymied.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
It's going to be.
This is another guy who's he had Tommy John surgery, so I mean, that's another guy that I wouldn't take with the pick. I mean, this is probably one of the worst drafts when it comes to college, like like arms. Period.
There's at least one
That's
Tommy
why he
John
fell.
guy that I would seriously consider, and I don't know if he's on our thing today or not, but that would be Connor Prelip.
Yeah,
Partly because he's already should be coming back from fully recovered here very soon.
yeah, I think his arm will be healthy
And
by the end of the year.
before he went down, he was atop of the rotation kind of arm.
And that's why I don't think he's going to make it to 34, because I think somebody that is looking for a team like, well, fortunately the Dodgers aren't going to stop the D-backs from picking whoever at 34. A team like Dodgers, Yankees might swoop him up at the end of the first round kind of situation. Okay, it's like we don't have a lot of needs, but it's like, but we can get a high paying lottery ticket, and we trust our player development people to get the most out of them situation.
Yeah, Prelip going to the Dodgers would actually bother me because they are so good at developing pitching. And
that would bother me because then that means the D-backs passed on him at 34.
Prelip is a guy that he has had really good stuff before he went down, and he's at the timetable where he should be fully recovered.
I think the last mock I saw had Prelip going to the Padres, I think in the early 20s. Right around 20, I think. It's another team that makes a lot of sense since they're pretty good at developing pitching. Well, actually, no. Most of the rotation is guys that they picked up.
Yeah, they went out and got them.
All right, so go with another college bat here, Jacob Melton, outfielder from Oregon State. Type of guy that obviously another left bat, which the organization has some decent success with. But then you obviously bring up the question of short-term fit.
Well, I mean, I don't see him as being the kind that's going to rise particularly fast. If he stays on a normal timetable, he's probably coming up in 3 years. A lot of people really, really like Melton over Yerpe. I actually not Yerpe, Cermak. I actually like Cermak better. But that's, personal preferences. But Melton is gonna be like your prototypical left field, probably left fielder. Start off in center field, get moved to left field. Hit for average with some pop. A well-rounded player. I mean, I don't want to say that Alek Thomas, who we just now seeing, is a great comp, but I mean, it's the kind of tools I expect out of Melton.
I would argue to say that Thomas might have a better tool set than Melton.
I think Thomas is definitely a better defender. But overall, that's still the category I kind of see him in.
Anything, Wes?
Where's my... Sorry, I was having issues with my mic. Melton, the Alek Thomas comp, that's a pretty a good comparison. I mean, I'm looking at his numbers and glancing through some of the notes I have, and I mean, it's just not a very exciting player to me. I'll be honest. Once you get further down in the draft, I just kind of check out. I mean, he certainly could be a guy. It's I mean, once you get down lower in the draft, it's just a wait and see. It's all a crapshoot.
And once you probably get past the 10th overall pick, it comes down to player development. Anyway, we'll go to another college outfielder, Ryan Cermak from Illinois State.
He's probably my number one choice for likely at 34. And obviously, we don't know how many people or how many teams are going to be doing haircut deals and who's going to fall and be unexpectedly available. But if I'm looking at just where everybody is ranked right now, and if somebody like Prelip isn't available and they don't want to take the big swing and miss on him, then I go with Cermak, who has above average skills across the board. He can play any of the three outfield positions and play them very well. So he'll have a home out on the grass, no problem. He almost certainly winds up in right field, though, because he has a plus arm and then some. And his bat profile is like a corner outfielder, too. I mean, he has a slightly above average hit tool with significant power. Unlike the others in the system, though, he actually bats right-handed, and he's like 6'2", 6'1", 6'2".
Yeah, well built 6'1".
All right, so they have him listed at 6'1". That might still be generous, but I'm pretty sure he's still over 6 foot. That would be kind of nice too.
About the same height weight as Brooks Lee.
Yeah, but I think Cermak is not necessarily a sneaky good pick, but I think he is a solid pick for 34. And the boom bust on pretty small.
Yeah, boom bust picks I'm less worried about at 34.
I like Cermak. He's a safe pick. He's a safe pick at 34, and he really the fact that he's right-handed really helps there, and I think he's that'd be an unsurprising pick at if they actually drafted him. I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I think it's a situation you try to go get him at 34. Don't wait for him to fall to 43.
I don't think he's available come 43.
No, that's right around the range you would go if you let him go at 34, and I think you could actually get him.
I would be surprised if he's available there.
Yeah, that's the situation. You can get him for possibly below slot at 34, and then you make your splurge pick at 43.
At 34, he might go under slot, but if he requests full slot, I don't think you blink. I think you just give it to him. It's not like 34 has a huge slot bonus, and as a safe pick, you don't necessarily want to piss away a safe pick.
Yeah, I can think of the Houston doing that in 2014, but then there was also extenuating circumstances, and they were being proven right anyway.
Yeah.
All right, another SEC arm, Jonathan Cannon out of University of Georgia.
And
his name's Jonathan Cannon. I'm for it. That's based on name for a reliever. As long as he can throw hard, then do it.
It's going to be definitely interesting. Cannon was considered potential first-round pick 2 years ago, but hasn't quite put it together.
Right.
I think that's a.
I know that the guy's got 4 legit pitches. The question is whether or not somebody's going to develop him as a starter, or if now that he has had a few years pitching in college, none of those pitches have played up. The pitches essentially have the same grades now as they did then. So I would say that, somebody's more than likely to try to develop him as a reliever instead. But he already has the control in enough pitches that somebody, especially if you're talking about a team like St. Louis or Miami, teams with long track records of developing great pitching in Tampa Bay, these are teams that might take him and still see a potential starter because maybe they can get something extra out of his skills. But I think he may have already topped out.
All right, so
Yeah, I
LSU
agree.
second.
I don't think that can like he'd end up being. That's pretty the only commentary I have left on him is I don't see him sticking as a starter. He's going to end up being a bullpen arm.
I think Cannon's much more likely to make it to 40. Cannon's not a guy to take at 34. I would consider it at 43, unless the Diamondbacks have a different plan at 43, and we're gonna start going into a couple more college bats to go through. Cade Doughty, second baseman from LSU. He was a guy that was. I was say he was their third baseman, then he got pushed over to second when Barry transferred from Arizona.
Right.
Barry himself didn't stick at third base either.
Should tell you something.
I think they, like I said, they moved him to second base. I believe. He's one of those guys. I think Pipeline has him as 50 across the board. I think. So that kind of makes him an underslot candidate at 43 if they wanted to go that route and land their high school guy at 34. That's the only way I could justify that selection.
Yeah, I don't even see why he would.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like he'd be in the mix at all. It would be an underslot signing at 34. I'm not impressed at all by his output in college. So,
if you're wanting a guy who's going to be defensively limited to second base and maybe just DH or first, then just take Tamar Johnson with the second pick. Use that savings to get somebody better at 34.
34 or 43.
Yeah.
Or both.
So we'll address the catcher position here. Dalton Rising from Louisville. It's the guy that replaced Henry Davis at catcher at Louisville. Probably more of a guy that's more likely to make it down to 43 in the draft if the D-backs wanted to go to 34. Their high school selection.
There are a couple catchers I like in this draft. All of them are going to go in the first round, but I don't like any of them enough to go with them with the second pick. So I think you just move on.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a pretty weak draft for catching overall.
That's not uncommon.
Yeah, it's the hardest position to draft. Considering the team the Diamondbacks historically haven't looked at the catcher position. Haven't had a lot of chances to draft a catcher, I might add. Either.
And the one time they did, it was a complete bust.
Yeah, and that was the guy that wasn't even projected to stick. Yeah, I was going to say Traha was not going to stick a catcher.
I would go last year. Was he at number one, like the second rounder?
Dalton Varsho?
No, Del Castillo last year.
Oh yeah, they did take Del Castillo. That's still the D-backs' best chance at a catcher because he's the only one.
Yeah, he has been hitting great this season. He seems to be picking up his hitting a little recently, but the Diamondbacks haven't historically drafted catchers very high. I think those are the three highest drafted catchers in the Diamondbacks draft history is Trahan, Varsho, and Del Castillo.
Yeah, Varsho's now outfielder. Traha busted, and Del Castillo's still hanging in there to some degree.
Well, it's his first. It's his first. It's his first full season. I really don't expect much out of him. A lot of catchers, like especially going from college to a full season minor league, or especially if they play, like if they've it's an exhausting position. That's the reason why like you don't see a lot of catchers like make it all the way through.
I just don't see any way that they go with Dalton rushing at 34 or
Yeah, I
40.
don't either.
Hell, he might even be available in the third and fourth round. He might not be because the draft is light on catching, but no one's going to be weeping if we don't get a guy that is kind of mediocre with either of those picks.
All right, so if you're wondering, D-backs third round pick is at 82.
And I could easily see him being available there, and I'm still not sure I would take him.
All right, so last college guy, the guy that throws 105, Ben Joyce.
And this is where it's the swing big, miss big. Swing big,
Yeah.
This guy could be a top of the rotation arm if he can build up stamina. If he doesn't do that, he's Aroldis Chapman on roids.
I was gonna say Aroldis Chapman in a mirror.
Out of all these guys, I'd go with Joyce just based on the velocity.
The question about Joyce is whether or not he'll be available. But if he is, I would have no problems with the Diamondbacks using the 34th or the 43rd. I don't see him making it down to 43. It might be pushing it to make it to 34, but if he does, grab him because now you've got another guy that has huge potential. And even if he only makes half his potential, you still have an all-star caliber back in the arm. Now, granted, maybe he busts completely, but that's what happens when you swing big sometimes.
Yeah.
The only
situation with the guys with that kind of velocity, you're going to deal with the potential injury risk no matter what. Like the human arm is not meant to throw a baseball that hard. Given that, if the guy is a freak and stay healthy, that's a potential and actually can develop the stamina, like you're saying. Best case scenario, you have a hell of a good draft pick at 34 or 43, but I don't think he'll be available I
was going to say, he did have Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, he's already had Tommy John, and
he's probably not going to start.
This year, they tried not to have him pitch on back-to-back days, but that was an organizational philosophy more than it was his health demanded it kind of philosophy. But he has worked as a starter before and could. The thing about Ben Joyce is you already know what kind of stuff he has. So the biggest part of development will be, is he going to be developed as a starter? If he is, then you accept that despite the fact that he's a college arm, it could take 3 to 4 years to get him to the majors. But if you're going to go ahead and develop him as a reliever from the get-go, then he could be a high leverage arm by the end of the first year. And he could be one of those relievers that is the first guy to make the majors from a draft, just because that's a reliever. He only needs to be able to put in so many innings and they can stash him for a while. But I could easily see a team developing him, having him come up by August of next year.
I'll say that Joyce is probably, for the best way to keep his arm healthy, I think he's probably a one inning only guy out of the bullpen. Maybe you can get
welcome to modern baseball, though.
You could, another way you could possibly deploy him is, actually, I don't think the opener is going to. The opener is more of a gimmick than it is any staying power because it messes around with everyone else's routines, kind of thing. But if it's a situation you can do it.
Yeah. Actually, you're very right about that, James. Like if a team drafts Joyce and immediately puts him as a reliever, he would be probably one of the fastest risers in this draft. My headphones are being weird.
Now let's go to some targets the Diamondbacks might take in their latter two selections to try make use of that second overall pick. We'll start with Jacob Miller, high school pitcher out of Ohio.
My understanding is that Miller is considered more polished than some of the other names I know we're getting ready to discuss. My issue with Miller, as much as anything, is that I just don't see him as having quite the upside others do. And he's a guy that I also think is going to be difficult to get away from. Where's he going? He's going somewhere in the south.
Louisville.
Thank you. And I think he's going to be hard to pull away from Louisville because he's one of those guys who has all the makeup that you want out of a Friday night starter, and his stuff is going to play up as he bulks up some because he's not at his full size, even close. So you're looking at a guy who, you're going to have to throw a lot of money at him.
I lost my audio.
And I don't see the upside there.
My headphones died. I'm not really like high school pitchers. Like he's a guy who'll probably take more money than it will take this. Like I see Miller very likely going to college. I don't see a team signing him unless they pull him away with the overslot bonus.
I was gonna say a team like Baltimore, Arizona might be able to pull it off. Once you get further down, the other 28 teams, I don't know. It very much because both teams have the muscle to try and pull that one off.
Right, and there are two other if they're going to take high school arm with the savings, there are two other arms I would look at before him, even though he might have a higher upside than one of them. We'll see. We're getting there, though, so I won't jump the gun on that.
All right. Go with a 6'9" lefty. The D-backs certainly know how to deal with a 6'9" lefty. Noah Schultz from Oswego East High School in Illinois.
If I'm taking a high school arm, he's the high school arm I'm taking.
He's the high school arm I've heard of, so I'll agree with James there.
His slider is ridiculous, and it's only getting better. His fastball is actually considered his best pitch, and it touches 98. And he is not done developing, so you're looking at a guy who can probably touch triple digits by the time he fills out, at least on the reach back. 6'9" throwing triple digits is something to be afraid of. His slider has over 3,000 RPMs, so it's got significant bite and can drop off the table when he wants it to. But again, at 34, 43, either one, it doesn't matter. If you're going to get Noah Schultz, you're paying him a top 10 pick kind of bonus. So if the Diamondbacks are going to muscle up and get him in that range, then they definitely took a haircut deal at picking number 2, or they're doing that whole drafting a whole bunch of college seniors with all the rest of their picks and giving each of them $50,000 a pop to.
I don't think they'll be doing that. I've not seen any history of that.
I've seen other teams do it. I've never seen the Diamondbacks do it, and Hazen has never really come across as the kind of guy to put all his eggs in one or two baskets and punt on the rest. But if they aren't going to do that, then they need to get savings at the top in order to have anything.
Yeah.
Because Schultz is the kind of guy.
Schultz is a guy who'll go. He's not going to go for. He's not going to be a very underslot guy. He'll probably go for slot or above slot. So they need to save money elsewhere to get him. Oh, I'm 6'7" and I weigh 220, and he's 6'9" and weighs the same. Which tells me that he still is he's gonna be a lot bigger.
I was gonna say the combined slot bonuses between 34 and 43 is $4 million.
The Schultz is a guy that could very likely wind up being the Friday night starter for Vanderbilt within his first season there. And in 3 years, as long as Schultz stays healthy, he's a top 10 pick easy.
So that means the D-backs have a chance.
There really is no reason for him to be taking a slot pick that's not paying like he's a,
Middle of the first round.
Yeah, he's a guy I could see definitely going to college and getting a lot more money than he would in this draft. But there's always, it's always the risk of getting injured along the way.
That's really boils down to the only way the Diamondbacks are getting Schultz is if he bets on, if they have money left over from their number 2 pick, and B, he really, really wants to play in the bigs right away. If he's willing to bet on himself even a little bit, he's out of pretty much everybody's reach as soon as you get to the 12th pick in the draft.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, he if he's going to bet on himself, he's not going to sign.
All right, so the next arm is Jackson Ferris, left-hander out of the ING Academy. Teammate of Elijah Green.
Yep.
I think we could be in the same situation.
Yeah. I've got not much about. I know that he throws much harder than most. I've got him at 95 to 97. But he doesn't have nearly the spin rates of some of these other guys. And he's got a reputation for not being able to throw strikes consistently. Granted, he's a high school arm, so that could change. But high school arms are just so hard to develop to begin with that I'd rather take a guy that throws 92 to 94 but throws strikes all the time than a guy throwing 97 who's throwing strikes a third of the time.
It's like Luis Frias versus Merrill Kelly. Third and final guy. Like I said, there's a lot of decent arms in the draft. I'm not even going to try and pronounce this guy's name. We can go right on.
Andrew Dukanich.
Dukanich, yeah.
And I guess he's another one who's going to Vandy. I remember that much. Again, I think that there are probably safer picks. I don't know that the upside is there over even some of the other people we've already discussed that are almost certain to be available. And when we're talking about guys that are already ranking in the top, depending on your outlet, anywhere from top 25 to top 45, and they're going to a baseball factory like Vanderbilt, Arizona State, these are, U of A is becoming one sort of.
Well, on the hitting side, they are.
On the hitting side, yeah.
Yeah.
But, if you're going to go to if they're already committed to going into an MLB factory and they're already ranked so highly, they really need to stand out enough that makes it worth paying what it's going to cost to keep them from going.
Yeah.
And I think that there are plenty of more obtainable arms and bats both at 34 and 43. Several of them from the college ranks, which will help keep the costs down. And these are almost guys that, might actually be better off being selected in the 11th or 12th round and throwing the heaping pile of everything saved from the first 10 rounds. And if you don't get them, you don't get them. But if you do, great.
I was going to say, when the Diamondbacks have gotten past the 10th round, I think only one player they've given a signing bonus of 7 figures to. It was barely over $1 million.
Right. And that's guys like Dukanich and so forth, they're going to be high-ranked picks in a few years anyway.
And not likely to project it to go in the range that they would need to get the money to prevent them from going.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so open floor. Any names worth mentioning for 34 or 43 that we did not get to?
In the comments, someone mentioned Charlie mentioned drafting Rocker if he's available at 34. Would you draft him at 34?
Not without medical. What? Not unless I had his medicals. I'm less worried about the arm.
I agree.
For what it's worth. I think there's something else at play.
If he's available at 34, I'd take him. I just absolutely do not see him making it past the 20 to 25 range, though.
I don't either.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he'll fall that far. If he's available, take him. Certainly, you can sign him, and he looks healthy. I've seen some footage of him pitching. He looks healthier than he did.
So
he's been pitching. So I don't see the risk that was there before.
This whole well, he needs to show the medicals. Well, Boris is not wrong on the fact that the only thing that the medicals can do is hurt him, and that's any pitcher.
Yeah, any player.
Medicals can only be used to suppress your signing dollar, because there's no such thing as an arm that does not show fatigue if you've been pitching well enough and long enough.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a clean medical.
Yeah, especially not for a pitcher.
So, there's no way that he didn't show him the first time around. He's pitched since then and pitched healthy. There's no way Boris is going to have him showing him now.
I was going to say, the reason the medicals were considered is because his velocity was up and down last year.
Yeah.
He was down in his last start, too, if I remember correctly.
They also rode him so hard that it was just as likely to be from overuse as anything. And this is a guy that would pitch more pitches in a game than most pitchers and was going on short rest more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just don't see there being any way that his medicals are going to come out now when they didn't come out when he was the 6th overall pick.
I think it was 10th overall, but he signed a $6 million. $6 million bonus.
If I'm looking at arms that I think would be available at 34, I still think that there's an outside chance that Cooper Yerpe is available, and he's somebody I would be interested in. He's a 6'2" to 6'4", depending on who you're reading. Left-handed starter out of Oregon State.
Yeah, I was going to say, guys with his track record tend to perform well anyway.
Yeah. He's got 3 above average pitches already and has plus control. This is a guy that, he's got pitchability. He already is pretty intelligent about it. And he limits free passes very well. So he's somebody I would definitely see interest in. if he makes it down to 34. I don't think there's any way he makes it to 43. But I think he could easily make it to 34, especially if there are teams kind of doing some reaches elsewhere to try and steal somebody. And then out of the high school ranks, the intriguing one for me is Walter Ford. Part of the reason he's intriguing is he went out of his way to get himself declared eligible a year early, which makes me think he really wants to sign. But at the same time, he's got the tools already that if he doesn't sign, he's another guy that's going to be
mid to high first rounder in 3 years.
Yeah, and so it's going to be kind of, it really is going to boil down to why did he declare to go early? Is he just trying to get everything ahead of schedule? Because in 3 years, he's still going to be only 20 coming out of college.
Well, also, he would be eligible for the draft a year earlier out of college as well, since it would have been 3 years.
That's an interesting wrinkle that he declared himself early for the 2020 draft. I wasn't aware of that.
He's a full year younger than the guys we're looking at first at 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is very intriguing if he's available at 34 and he's not like fully committed to a university program.
Alabama.
Yeah, he is committed to Alabama, and that's a program that is very good at developing. So this is why I'm really kind of wondering what the angle is here. The cross checkers better be way on top of their game. But if he declared for the draft early, you got to think that he at least is leaning towards wanting to play.
Yeah,
so
that's how I would read that.
So maybe he does go for 34 or 43 plus a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say those at 34, you could probably get away with a $3 million signing bonus there. But if you took him at 43 with that same money, you would have to take a haircut pick at 34 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like, I mean, if he was really fully intending on playing for Alabama, he would not have declared for the 2022 draft. So clearly, if the money's like, if a team bowls him away and drafts him high enough, it's probably, I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't want to be like, you know, the money's there. Why not sign?
Fortunately, I think Diamondbacks are one of the few teams that could pull it off. Baltimore,
I think they could too. I'm not sure that they will. He is, after all, a high school arm. He's got a lot of growing in to do still, like a whole lot.
Yeah, and the current front office's track record with high school arms hasn't been so great. Although they've only taken one guy in the first night, and that guy's doing fine.
But yeah, like I said, Ford is intriguing. We don't know enough about his particular situation to really have any idea as to whether or not he's even going to be an option.
I think it's one of those things where some fluid situation in the draft depends on what happens at 2. If they take, as you mentioned with Schultz, if they get like Johnson, Lee, or Holiday for like $6 million, I think this is absolutely in play.
Right, that's where a lot of it comes down to this whole portfolio best available. But Drew Jones is there, you take him. If he's not, then how much does everything cost before we get to somebody like Schultz? And so Schultz is not coming cheap. Schultz is not.
These guys are.
Schultz is not coming for 34 slot money. Schultz is coming for 34 slot money plus.
I mean, if you're a high schooler who's committed to a college program, the main reason to do that is to raise your leverage. You have more leverage than any other time in your life as a player, is when you're signing out of high school and you're committed to a good baseball program. And then each year you have less leverage. So, none of these guys will come cheap.
Yeah. I was going to say,
at least
look
the high
at some
schooler.
Yeah. If you look at some of the things, I didn't list Snelling or Lesko in there because obviously they're going to get drafted where they're going to get enough money to do so.
Yeah, Porter and Lesko and Williams and those guys, they're all going to go first round, like first round for real. So
you have a lot, and then a lot of if you look at the pipeline board, a lot of college guys in that 34 to 43 range, believe it or not. But that's usually a hot spot for college college players anyway.
Right.
Because now the top high school talents are either taken or unsignable at that point. Or teams or a case of another team having already made a haircut selection in the first round and then going to make their move not too long after. So anyway, Wes, you have any anyone that we haven't discussed yet?
Yeah, I don't have a player that's really that I would think that's in play, because I think it's such a really we'll have no idea how this draft will shake out and until draft day, and we know who the Orioles are going to pick, and then depending on who they pick, it can completely change the situation. I mean, if they don't sign Jones, that's going to take up probably more money than any of the other players. So then your whole board is affected. So I really
Jones takes half your entire pool.
Number one pick.
More than half the pool is with the number 2 overall pick. So 8.1 out of 15 million.
Right.
So if you take a guy that takes most of it, you're pretty much just going.
Yeah.
EPA, maybe you make a couple under slot and you make a splurge in the 3rd round.
Kind of thing. If Drew Jones is available, you take him, you pay him.
Yeah.
If he's not available, then you're looking at what's your plan for the savings, and then take based off of who is going to meet that then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a situation that Baltimore found themselves in 2 years ago when Torkelson went 1st overall. There were actually some mock drafts that didn't list him as 1st overall, believe it or not, but I didn't believe him.
There were people that were being contrary just to get clicks.
That's exactly what it is. When there's a guy like Torkelson and you see people going completely against the consensus, it is just for clicks at this point.
So anyway, any final thoughts before we close it out here?
I think we've covered just about everything.
Yeah, I think so. I'm really like I said, I have no idea what will happen in this draft. So don't take my opinion on it, because I know just as much as everyone else, and it's really we'll know after the Orioles take their pick.
It may not be until the last hour of the draft, last 5 minutes before the draft, before we find out, before they make a decision. It could come down to that close. If I remember correctly, they have Elias has definitely cut it down that close. Can't remember which year it was. It might have been the Kerstad year that they weren't sure until literally 5 minutes before the pick. So we're just pretty much waiting.
Yep.
Anyway, thanks everyone for watching today. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching the live stream on Twitter, leave a like on the Yeah, I was gonna say leave a like on the thing if you want. You can forget it. But more or less,
Like,
the draft
subscribe,
will
leave a
be
comment,
If
engage.
you tuned in, show us the love. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
say the actual draft will be 2 weeks from Sunday, July 17th. I think we'll be doing a show for that, right?
We will be.
Yeah, we will.
Or at least that's currently the plan. So we're going to do a draft day
As far
show.
as I know.
So it'll be the third year. If we do it, it'll be the third straight draft. So July 17th is the date. So between now and then, there'll be some draft coverage on the Snake Pit. You'll want to check out the articles. Pat already had a couple come out this week. One with the overall bonus pool, as well as what the Orioles have done in what the Orioles' current general manager has done in the past, as well as some player scouting reports coming out as well.
Got at least 5 of those, maybe 6.
Very much. We'll definitely make
I hope
sure those
everyone
are
has
covered.
a wonderful day.
All right.
And you'll see me on weekends covering the minor leagues. Until then.
All right. Good night, everyone.